And I think an enthusiast is probably somebody who finds something that they are passionate about and follows through with it very, very strongly, and gets into that world, understanding who the big players are, and who, let's say, the product or thing that they're into is, and their world really revolves around that. And they are, in the essence of the world, enthusiastic about doing anything that relates to that. I realized that I had some kind of talent for that really remarkably at 7 years old, which is nuts. So my grandfather, I grew up in Tel Aviv, and my grandfather would travel abroad and bring me back Lego sets. And I ended up building like fantasy worlds actually with it. It would be something more like Blade Runner, like something you would see there. And at 7 years old, it started, and I became kind of like the neighborhood like guru, and people would come to see what did I create. I didn't know that meant architecture though. And then when we moved to the States, I kept drawing, and I would ask my mom to get me things that I could draw with and draw floor plans, and we would go to bookstores and pick that up. And then I was really, really lucky that in my high school, they actually had an architecture class. And I took like 4 years of that in high school, and I basically perfected like the technical skills. Not the thinking skills, but the technical skills. And then what ended up happening is in college and undergrad, I already had all the technical stuff, but my teachers had me unlearn everything in a way, because my mind was just so traditional, because that's all they were able to teach us in school. But I had, I guess, like a 4-year advantage. I was never a good student either, like in high school. Like that's something like people are always like, if they look up my history and they're like, oh, this guy went to Harvard, he must have been really, really intelligent. He must have always been such a nerd in school. I was not a good student. I was more interested in doing everything else but the class stuff, except for the architecture classes. I would probably, I owe one project to my career, and it takes being, always people say, the right place at the right time with the right tool set. And one of the most phenomenal stories of a project that I take back and take away from is a house that we did along the beach, and it's called Flip Flop House, and it's in Venice. And essentially the story that I love is how it all came about. And I hold it dear to my heart, because without that project, all the rest would never have happened. And basically I was standing in Sammy's camera here in LA, renting equipment to take a photo shoot of a project I just completed in San Francisco. And as that happened, oh, look at that. She's getting a cameo. And as that happened, basically somebody else approached me, and I was talking to the clerk, and I was trying to find out what lighting equipment to rent. And he turns to her and he says, hey, Hetty, you've been looking for an architect. Meet Dan. And this is where Harvard comes in, because he said, oh, he graduated from Harvard. And she said, well, my daughters studied law there. We had a great story, and we started speaking, and then she's like, hey, I actually own a piece of virgin land on the beach. Would you be interested in designing our beach house? I had just graduated Harvard. I was 27 years old. And I was like, of course. I was shocked. Stunned. I was like, how did this happen? And that became my first residential client, and opened up the doors to so many other things. And now we're doing a second home for them. And she became my second mother. And without that, without somebody trusting you, there's nothing. And so for anything that you do, and it goes back to asking, like what would you, what kind of passion, what would you do with architecture? You don't know, but just lead with knowing the fact that everybody else around you will guide you. My favorite, okay, wow, this is so difficult. Everyone answers to a different thing. I recently bought a dream car for me, which was a 1996 BMW M3 E36 model in bright red. And this car was very dear to me because when we moved to the States, and I remember the car coming out, and I remember going to my parents, I need this car, and they just laughed at me. They're like, no, we're not buying you this. One day you will buy one for yourself. And it was just a general statement about a BMW. And I was obviously pissed. You can imagine, just a brat, I guess. And they bought me a Ford, which was great, and I was happy, and I can't complain. They bought me a car. But about a few months ago, I bought myself one. And it's incredible, the stories that it's already living. And if you really think about it, it's an old car, but it has such veracity still. And the only thing I could think about is when I'm in it, it takes me back to 1996, and it makes me think, like, what would it have been like to drive it then? And it just makes me happy. It just makes me happy. And certain people that get it give you like a thumbs up. Other people probably look and they probably think like, oh wow, it's like a 1990s BMW. Why? But it's me, and that's what matters. So that right now is definitely my favorite car. Unfortunately, I lost my grandparents when I was young, but he would keep repeating about patience is the virtue of life or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I get it, Grandpa. But it's so true. It is so true. If you have patience, you learn how to also slow down your reaction to certain things. So when somebody, and this is something that I try to tell in my office too, or anybody else I'm around, okay, something bad happened. We're working through a process of design, let's say over budget, or let's say, the contractor messed up, or let's say something to do with the building department. Don't react. Stop, pause, breathe, count. People use that, let's say a 10-second countdown. Do that. And a lot of times it works itself out. Unbelievably, if you trust the process, just let it go. And I think it goes back to what I said before about your story is different than everybody else's. And I think growing up, I was looking up to idols and looking up to certain things and saying like, I want to achieve that. And I was trying to find out how to do exactly that. And I would tell somebody else today, like, no, find out what you want to do and go down the path, allow yourself to make mistakes, allow that patience, allow things to happen. It might happen when you're 30, it might happen when you're 40, it might happen when you're 20, it might happen when you're 60. Enjoy the course, that's it.